Just moments ago, Josh Gates finally confirmed what Expedition X viewers have suspected all along. There was footage captured during one investigation that the network refused to air, and it wasn't because of technical issues. According to Gates, what the team recorded that night was so disturbing that executives ordered the raw files locked immediately, and several crew members required medical attention afterward. A producer allegedly never returned to the field. What Josh just revealed explains why that episode will never be seen by the public. Make sure to subscribe if you want the full story as it unfolds. It was billed as a standard mid-season investigation, remote location, sparse documentation, and just enough local folklore to warrant a risk assessment. The Expedition X team was dispatched to an abandoned weather relay station originally decommissioned in the early 1990s, following a string of unexplained signal anomalies. Phil Torres and Jessica Chobot were accompanied by 2 additional camera techs and a single remote operator stationed half a mile away to monitor telemetry. According to internal production notes, they were only scheduled to be on site for 4 hours. The first hour ran smoothly. Field readings were normal, atmospheric pressure stable, battery levels well within range. Then, 79 minutes in, every piece of equipment registered a simultaneous frequency spike, followed by a complete blackout in the area surrounding the station. Not a malfunction, but a controlled interference, triggering only when Phil stepped into what was later marked Zone Delta. Crew accounts describe an immediate drop in air density, as if something displaced the oxygen itself. Jessica reported hearing static as though her headset was picking up a voice trying to form words. Phil described it differently, not interference, but intention. He said it felt like something was aware of their presence and adjusting to their observation. The ambient temperature log recorded a 5-degree fall within 13 seconds, which normally would indicate a weather shift, but wind detectors showed no airflow. Multiple cameras began recording compression artifacts shaped like silhouettes, even though no movement was visible to the naked eye. At 1 hour, 42 minutes in, one of the technicians collapsed, reporting sharp chest pressure and blurred vision. His vitals spiked, and he was pulled outside immediately. But even after extraction, his microphone still registered the same low, rhythmic distortion, exactly in sync with his heartbeat. What happened next led the network to place a hard stop on even reviewing the rest of the footage, and the next 12 minutes are what forced Expedition X into silence, until Josh Gates broke it today. What followed in the aftermath of the technician collapsing would later be described in an internal incident report as a non-standard medical emergency under unidentified environmental influence. Jessica and Phil dragged him beyond the perimeter while radioing the remote operator for immediate extraction. But before transport could be arranged, every headset and monitoring channel emitted an identical 2-second audio burst that none of them had heard before, almost like a distorted breath overlaid with a single, indecipherable word spoken backwards. When slowed down afterward during medical review, the waveform formed a perfect rhythmic pattern matching the subject's respiratory cycle. He regained consciousness moments later, but claimed he hadn't passed out, only stepped outside of his body. Psychological protocol required instant suspension from further filming. As standard safety measures kicked in, the team was ordered to return to base camp. Yet removing the equipment did little to stop what they were experiencing. Even outside Zone Delta, battery drains continued at accelerated rates, as if something was attached to the devices themselves, not the surroundings. Live uplink verification failed 3 consecutive attempts. The remote operator, who remained physically removed from the event, reported through a restricted channel that his screen showed camera feeds trying to adjust for a non-existent focal point. His exact words were logged, like it was tracking something that wasn't in front of them, almost behind. That note triggered the next step. Network HQ, already receiving fragmented telemetry data, intervened. Over a secure channel, production was ordered to execute what's officially known as a Phase 7 reset, meaning equipment shutoff, immediate departure, and containment protocol enacted without post-investigation discussion. Only used 5 times in network history, it's reserved for extreme extreme risk scenarios. The moment this order was given, the generators powering the relay station failed completely, not due to damage, but because the breaker flipped itself, despite being physically padlocked. The final recorded image before black screen? A blurred figure appearing between Phil and the technician, visible only on one camera angle. That frame was the last thing reviewed before access to the footage was sealed. The next 24 hours would determine whether Expedition X would even return to production. By the time the team arrived back at the staging area, the incident had already reached senior production executives. Initial assessments categorized the event as equipment and personnel compromise under unknown influence. Standard protocol dictated that footage be cataloged and forwarded for technical analysis. But before that process began, Josh Gates personally intervened, reportedly dialing into the emergency debrief via secure uplink just 31 minutes after the team returned. Though he wasn't physically on location, his role as lead executive producer granted him override authorization. What he heard during that debrief changed the entire approach. Jessica, still visibly shaken, described the moment the blackout occurred as if something reacted to us noticing it. She emphasized it wasn't merely environmental, but responsive, like the area itself shifted once the team acknowledged what they had detected. Phil echoed this sentiment but stated it differently. According to debrief transcripts, he said, "We weren't just documenting something unknown. We were seen, and it didn't want to be filmed." The technician who collapsed remained mostly silent. But when asked what he experienced, he reportedly whispered, "It doesn't want to stay where it is." His statement caused the call to go silent. Gates immediately requested raw file access to personally evaluate the telemetry sync and thermal imaging data before network review. That request was approved, but only under executive privacy restrictions, meaning only he and two senior analysts at headquarters could see it. Within hours, Gates confirmed privately that the footage captured sustained spatial compression inconsistent with known phenomena, implying intentional movement within the field of vision. Insiders say he told network leadership, "What's on that feed suggests more than activity. It suggests awareness." But instead of escalating to promotional material, Josh made a decision that surprised even executive staff. He demanded the footage be restricted from post-production entirely until external consultation could be arranged, refusing to allow even internal editors access. This marked the first time in Expedition X history where the lead host initiated content lockdown against network recommendation. That move triggered a series of legal evaluations that would ultimately determine the fate of the footage and of the episode. What Gates discovered in the raw thermal layer would make his next decision unavoidable. When Josh Gates accessed the restricted thermal and IR-enhanced playback, he expected to find corrupted imaging caused by equipment stress or compression glitches. Instead, what he saw is what insiders now believe prompted the network to permanently seal the segment. At precisely the moment the technician collapsed, the thermal feed from camera 3 captured what appeared to be a human-shaped distortion, positioned several feet behind Phil Torres. But unlike typical heat signatures, it showed negative thermal feedback, meaning it absorbed infrared rather than emitting it. This anomaly remained still for 2 seconds, then shifted subtly toward the lens without registering surface heat, breathing patterns, or any identifiable form of locomotion. Yet on the raw spectral enhancement, the shape's internal structure briefly displayed pattern-like movements resembling pulse fluctuations. The timestamp aligned exactly with the technician's sudden chest pain. The strangest part wasn't the silhouette itself, but what happened in the following few frames. As the blackout wave rolled through the equipment, the figure appeared to pivot, its form reacting to Phil's flashlight beam, even though infrared detection shouldn't respond to visible light. According to project files, Josh replayed the sequence 14 times before noticing a chilling detail. On the metadata overlay, the anomaly carried an exact posture match and height ratio to a weather technician who disappeared at the same location in 1987, whose last known transmission mentioned signal distortions following him. The disappearance was never solved. Immediately after this realization, the remainder of the playback started showing cascading compression blocks that didn't behave like standard digital artifacts. Instead of random pixelation, they consistently formed in a curved arc pattern behind Jessica, almost mimicking a slow, deliberate reach. Analysts attempted to isolate individual frames and manually reconstruct data, but buffer overlays repeatedly replaced any image refinement with low-frequency tones similar to lab-recorded infrasound stress patterns. One frame, which only remained fully intact for a fraction of a second, showed the silhouette inches from the camera before the feed cut completely. The shape's head appeared turned directly toward the lens. No facial detail, no visible structure, just density displacement, like compressed air forming a rough human outline. Josh reportedly turned off the feed and stated it's aware of the camera. After reviewing the footage, he requested immediate cessation of all attempts to digitally enhance or stabilize it, citing risk to personnel if further exposure triggered physiological aftereffects. But by then, viewing the footage may have already resulted in deeper consequences than anyone expected. Following Josh Gates's private review of the footage, Network Compliance initiated what insiders refer to as a black vault submission. This process is typically reserved for legal disputes, internal misconduct, or content deemed potentially dangerous if aired without regulatory evaluation. But this wasn't standard risk management. The footage wasn't just locked away, it was categorized under a rarely used contractual clause known as Section 7.4c, non-broadcastable incident content, originally added to protect the network from liability in cases involving locations tied to active criminal investigation. Expedition X had never triggered it before. The clause permits immediate suppression of media that could incite hazardous imitation behavior, promote exploration of restricted areas, or cause psychological impact beyond normal entertainment parameters. That language was drafted for urban exploration scenarios and disaster sites, not paranormal investigation. Yet legal determined the footage qualified after reviewing transcript excerpts that reportedly described environmental reactions directly tied to the crew's presence. One internal assessment read, "Activity seems responsive. Risk of human replication if aired." In other words, if people saw it, they might try to go there. Network Legal also flagged the local government's historical records regarding the 1987 disappearance connected to the abandoned weather relay station. That case was never declared closed, which means, because the figure in the footage matched the missing technician's biometric outline, the broadcast could be interpreted as evidence in a potential ongoing investigation. Even though the events occurred decades ago, airing it could open legal complications, including demands for forensic analysis or allegations of interference with a possibly unsolved death. What sealed the footage permanently wasn't just fear of public reaction, it was a leaked production memo from the on-site medical specialist who treated the collapsed crew member. In her write-up, she stated, "Patient displays stress markers consistent with post-traumatic attunement. He believes the encounter might not be geographically bound." The phrase, "not geographically bound," was underlined by multiple attorneys. That line alone escalated the content from restricted to sealed indefinite. Josh argued that suppressing data went against the scientific integrity of the show, but legal countered with potential lawsuits, and worse, psychological fallout for viewers. After a tense meeting, Gates reportedly agreed not to push for release, saying only, "If this becomes entertainment, we've already lost control of it." What none of the executives knew at that moment was that another copy of the footage existed, one stored automatically on a field hard drive no one accounted for. And that's the file that resurfaced days later. Days after the footage was sealed, a back-end systems check flagged a secondary storage device, a rugged field hard drive that had been left in the mobile monitoring station during the shutdown. It had captured a full sync copy before the blackout. A junior post-production tech, unaware of the legal hold, accessed it while compiling camera logs. What he saw prompted him to immediately forward the data to the medical specialist who had treated the collapsed crew member. That led to the most alarming entry in the internal file chain, the psychological incident memo. The specialist noted that while his physical condition stabilized, the technician reported a persistent sensation of being watched from somewhere that isn't behind me, more like beneath. He stated he felt something still tracking his heartbeat, even hours after removal from the site, despite no biological abnormalities. Further testing showed his neural response response spiked whenever playback of the footage began. Even when muted, he reportedly told her, "If you show that to anyone who isn't ready, it might follow them too." That line triggered immediate psychiatric evaluation. But the most disturbing element came from the junior tech's observation. In his incident report, he wrote, "I fast-forwarded through the final 30 seconds. The image distortion briefly shifts into the corner, like it sees the reflection of the monitor. Then, at the exact moment the technician wakes after collapsing, a noise comes through the audio track. But the gain settings were at 0. No microphone was on." Following this discovery, the tech requested reassignment and refused to work night hours. Within 48 hours, his report was integrated into the legal file, and the secondary drive was seized. That incident directly resulted in the file being classified at an even higher level, no longer under broadcast restriction, but under internal non-exposure protocol. And that's when Josh Gates was told something that changed his stance permanently. Someone else had already watched the file, alone, and what they reported next would shake even him. Before the secondary hard drive was confiscated, at least one individual managed to watch the final minutes alone, without supervision or biometric monitoring. That person was a mid-level producer assigned to verify damaged media files before they were formally archived. According to his unsigned internal statement, he viewed the footage late at night, believing it was simply corrupted audio-visual data. What happened during those minutes escalated the crisis beyond what Gates or network executives anticipated. He reported that while scrubbing through the footage frame by frame, the anomaly seemed to shift in behavior. Rather than remaining static as earlier versions showed, it gradually began tracking the camera's perspective, adjusting as though aware of his interaction with it. He claimed that at approximately 1:43:14 into the recording, the shape moved slightly closer each time he paused. Thinking it was playback lag, he checked latency. There was none. Then, in the last clean frame before auto-corruption began, the silhouette appeared directly aligned with the camera lens, positioned at eye level. He stated that although no face was visible, he felt acknowledged. What unsettled investigators was what happened afterward. System logs recorded a spike in room temperature despite no HVAC adjustments. He abruptly exited the server room, logged off without filing verification, and drove home without explaining to staff. When contacted the next morning, he claimed he had no memory of leaving work. His vehicle GPS showed he made an unscheduled stop at the investigation location's general vicinity over 3 hours away before returning home. He tendered his resignation the next day, citing irreversible exposure to subject matter beyond broadcast intent. His final note read, "We didn't expose it, it exposed us, and it knows the difference." Following this, external auditory forensic specialists were brought in against standard protocol. What they discovered inside the recording led to the most controversial decision in Expedition X history. The forensic specialists were asked to analyze the final retained audio signal, something the network hoped would help attribute the interference to an explainable anomaly. Instead, their report stated the waveform exhibited frequency structuring matching intentional rhythmic sequencing. Put plainly, it looked like something was responding to the monitoring equipment, forming signal patterns that, under slow playback, sounded eerily similar to controlled breathing. One analyst concluded that the reading was consistent with a presence attempting to regulate or sync with an external biological system. That system was later cross-referenced with the collapsed crew member's cardiac rhythm. When this was relayed to Josh Gates, he reportedly remained silent for nearly 10 seconds before responding. According to two sources familiar with the meeting, he finally said, "If this becomes televised entertainment, we're responsible for what comes next." That statement, more than the footage itself, led to the final decision: permanent suppression. The network declared the episode unrecoverable. Personnel involved were barred from public discussion, and the location was struck from production clearance lists. Earlier today, Josh Gates was asked about the infamous unaired episode during a live interview. Rather than repeating the standard technical failure explanation, he He paused and said, "Some footage isn't meant to be broadcast because of what it does to the people who filmed it, and sometimes because of what it tries to do afterward." He didn't elaborate, but the panel fell silent. That was the first public acknowledgement that what was filmed had active impact. He ended the segment with, "We shut it down to protect the crew. Some things aren't scared to be found. They're waiting to be noticed." The interview cut to break immediately. No further questions were allowed.